Hello and welcome back to Prism and Company. On the docket today, dun 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 dun, the Haindl Tarot. It's a thing of beauty. Now, I have talked a little bit about this deck in my complete deck collection and also in my top 5 decks I couldn't live without. But I had a viewer request. Someone specifically requested a flip through of this deck, and I believe the comment was something along the lines of, can you do a flip through of this deck and just talk about a couple of your favorite cards? And now, I don't know if you've seen sort of the feed so far of the hour-long videos, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Now, a flip through, typically that I've seen, is like 2 minutes long. So I'm going to challenge myself to get this video to like, I don't know, 30 minutes maybe? We'll see how it goes. I actually honestly have no idea how long this will be. What I wanted to do specifically for this flip through is not focus on everything. That would be insane. First of all, there's so much to talk about, but this is also a deck that I want to give the Prism treatment to. And I know I've mentioned that a few times and I've got some in the works, but it's just a lot of kind of preparation to get something like that done. So I want to focus on a very specific element of this deck, and that's its illusory quality. I only want to point out things in the cards, that I want to talk about, or that specifically kind of invoke that optical illusion, illusory nature. With that, I say let's jump right in. I've got the full stack here, and we're all organized up. How I'm going to do this, we're going to take a look at all of the suits. We're going wands, cups, swords, stones. And I have the ace through 10, and then the daughter, son, mother, father. And then we have all of the majors at the end. I never think pips get enough love, so I always kind of want to start with them. Looking up here first at the Ace of Wands, the thing that strikes me the most about this card is that it really looks almost like it's from another deck. Things look very flat here. There's not a lot of this movement or space that you see in some of the other cards. It's still really beautiful, but it just seems very different. Even just peeking at the two, it's wild how different those cards are. I think what I'm going to do is kind of leave cards around and off to the side so you can still kind of see them as we work and talk. Now, the Two of Wands, not a lot of illusion happening. This is actually one of the more solid spaces that we see in the deck, but it is totally beautiful. Tons of depth. We can see kind of an archway here and moving back into these holes. I particularly like this little bit at the bottom here that almost looks like a crevice going down. The only bit that's a little bit odd to me is right here, this little crescent almost. It almost seems like this is a plateau maybe, or it weirdly makes it look like a piece of bread or like a cracker or something, it's just wild to me. That's the only tiny little outlier in an otherwise absolutely beautiful card. I mentioned the 3 before, but we have this almost like liquid fire that overtakes the whole scene. And that could certainly be smoke or something else like that, but just a beautiful little addition to help kind of make this card feel a little less solid and a little more almost fluid or liquid, which is a really cool choice for a 3. The 4 is interesting because we have a definite shape happening here. It looks almost like stone at first. We also maybe have like an eye in the background potentially. And then it also looks like this is just the surface of something, like we can look behind it a little bit here and up here. A very animal pelt quality to this one to me, which is a little bit different than the stone structures that we've seen before. But we also have the bubble, which is an interesting choice for a 4, specifically the 4 of Wands, because 4s seem so kind of solid and rigid, and a bubble feels so poppy or so ephemeral. I think that's cool. Very cool overlap. This one, we get into like a what the heck is going on? I think this is supposed to be like a structure peeking out. We can almost see a corner there. Dark on one side, light on the other. Really, really beautiful rendering. And then maybe a person on top. I see like a head and arms and legs, maybe with like something coming off of them, or just kind of ephemeral light or a shape. Any of that being said, though, I love the idea of kind of these pockets of light on one side and then some pockets of dark kind of elsewhere. Really cool and beautiful. Like this one in particular doesn't speak to an actual space to me. It just feels a little bit odd, which is very cool. That's like one of my favorite things about this deck. Here, we're totally abandoning the structure of some of these other cards that we've seen, specifically kind of these stones. Now for leaves, and delicate leaves at that, we have all the little vein structure happening in them, and even some, I don't know, maybe like decay from like the bottom of the forest or something. It's really stunning and really beautiful. And I like the idea of life being breathed a little bit more into the suit as we go. We've gone from very hard and stony to, getting a little bit more movement, some fragility with a bubble, a lot of kind of change down here with the 5, moving into growth with the 6. A very neat little progression. I'm not 100% sure if that was intended. A lot of this does seem sort of just abstract and ephemeral for abstract's sake, but I also don't have the guidebook and I haven't looked a ton in, and clearly a lot of thought and time was put into this, so I don't mean to down it at all. Here we get back to a real space. So we have a horizon line and some structures coming out. The illusory nature of this, though, feels very much like these are odd organic shapes, maybe like a giant skull almost, but nothing feels quite right. I'm now remembering as I'm talking that I'm only supposed to be talking about the weird illusory stuff, so we're going to get back to that. But yeah, this feels very like Cthulhu to me, very H.P. Lovecraft. Like we have these odd beings, these almost look like eyes to me a little bit, but they're just alien and solid and you can't quite tell what it is. I also like that little moon peeking out. Very lovely little addition. Little Rider-Waite-Smith throwback here with the 8 of Wands. Nothing particularly illusory about it, except for the fact that the background seems flatter than some of the other cards. Even though we have wands poking out, it doesn't feel as spacious as, say, this card, which looks like a landscape. This feels like we're just looking through a tiny little bit, almost at like a fake painted background. But again, that feeds into the weird oddness of this deck. Just love it. This one is definitely reaching into that weird territory. This motif comes up a lot in this deck. It almost looks like nostrils and a mouth and like eyes, these kind of like strange faces that kind of like breathe in and out of the landscape, and just like all these little bits that make up stones or structures. But if you look at them closer, they're also creatures or something. This one leans heavily into that optical, illusory strangeness, and I just love it. This big crack along the side in particular really helps cement this as a solid structure, but then as you get closer to the top, you're like, wait, but it's like reaching out and wrapping behind. How is there a crack on this seemingly like the space doesn't quite make sense. Like it feels like it should be leaning back this way, but we're almost looking at the top of something here. Very cool, very mind-bendy. I like it a lot. This one incorporates some animals. We see animals very sparingly throughout the deck, and they always are very powerful when they show up. But, we see a bird kind of over here, and I think that is the eye, either the small black dot or this larger one here. That might be an ear as well. Again, that kind of weird illusionness where this forms the top of the card, but we can't quite tell where the animal starts and stops. It just bleeds into the scenery. And that bleeding is so darn successful in the whole suit. Really cool. Quite a shift from hard structure in the 2, and even like a very just kind of plain scene in the 1, through kind of this softness going into the 4, 5, 6. Then we start to get more fragile in the 6 with the leaves, and then things just begin to get crazier and crazier as we go. Strange skulls, shapes that you can't even make out in the 9. But then all weirdly wrapping up in the 10 to kind of this oddness still, but with life, with figures, not figures, but animals. A really cool little progression through the 10s there, or the wands, excuse me. I'm not going to dwell too much on the court cards. There aren't a lot of oddities to them because they really are portraits, but they're beautiful. Here we have Radha. We have Krishna. I don't think you roll that R. I just felt inspired to. We have Kali and Brahma. Just gorgeous. This one is definitely the oddest, just with all the extra eyes. It feels very deity-like, for lack of a better term, or like spiritual. Like you can't quite focus on the right element of it. Very cool. Nice little red hues in the court cards for the wands as well. Just nice little tie in there. Onto the Ace of Cups. Again, the aces in this deck are just very, very odd to me. They just feel so different from their suits, but that's fairly consistent, and I like that. I don't mind some oddities as long as it's intentional and follows through. Very kind of twisty, turny Ace of Cups. Here with this Two of Cups, we have this bird, but the bird almost gets like galactic in here. Again, we see those like weird pocketed eye motifs. And to me anyway, it looks like this folds in front of the bird, but that also forms the background of the bird up here. That feels very optical illusion-y. And this bird is like folding in on itself and emerging from this tube. Clearly a peacock, I believe. As I say clearly, I'm like, maybe actually. A lot of weird folding, unfolding that's happening. And that's kind of cool for it too as well, this like ebbing and flowing. Let's see, I think I have the whole screen covered. I'll see once I'm done. On the 3 here, we're back to a real space. I don't really know what this is, but it looks organic enough that it could be coral or rock. So lovely, but not particularly illusory. This 4, what a wild image. We have like little echoes of maybe the 6 of Wands with like branches or some sort of life. But this to me, like we obviously have leaves down here. So are we maybe looking at a tree perhaps? Like maybe we're looking up at the sky. This also looks like we're looking down into a pool at say like Yellowstone National Park or something. Like the deeper parts are blue and then it gets more green as we can start to see more of the rock through it. There's a weird perspective thing happening in this card that makes my mind a little bendy that I absolutely love. The leaves down here, they'll get me every time. Just super cool. The 5 of Cups. Again, we're back to like this weird, slightly too organic space. I'll be curious to see. I want to pay attention to the 5s in this deck because the 5 of Wands was that weird, odd structure growing out with the light on top. This one feels much more sinewy maybe, or like it's blossoming in sort of an uncomfortable, deathly way. A lot of structure down here with maybe stone, but then like the stone forms like waves that are crashing. Super cool. And I think very powerful color choice for the 5 as well, because there's not a lot of blue in that. Oh, such a cool 6. It's interesting that the 4 and the 6 almost seem to flip-flop from the Wands to the Cups, because the 4 of Wands had the bubble where the 6 of Cups has the bubble, and the 6 of Wands had the leaves where the 4 of Cups had the leaves. Boy, that was a weird thing to try and think through. Here though, I think this looks pretty correct as far as space goes. It seems like this is kind of going back into the distance. Maybe we have clouds. Then there's a pillar of water. There are some like odd shapes happening. Maybe that's like a ghost or something on the water. We can almost see a reflection down there. It's spooky and haunting, but not nearly as abstract as some of the stuff that we've seen. Very cool. 7 of Cups, again, kind of approachable, but we do get some weirdness. Like, so this is coming down here. This almost looks like stone. And then it seemingly maybe wraps under like a cave. But this particular shape here, that color really pushes it forward. So we have, it almost looks like a tube with something coming out of the center of it. Like this is a cylinder that's going back with a channel down the center that's filled. But that also forms into the ground here, which maybe goes back into the distance. There's some oddness happening. You can't quite make out what it is. Very kind of arresting though as an image. It's cool. I need to like get a thesaurus or something. I feel like I use the same words all the time. This to me, and this might just be me reading into this deck, again looks like a weird elongated skull maybe. Like there's eye sockets and the bridge of a nose coming down and then just some damage happening. And that's again feeding into the environment. And anytime these shapes kind of feed out of the environment, that gives me weird, odd vibes. You know, oh man, it's cool doing this. I never realized how like, I don't know if creepy is the right word or like unnerving this deck is. It's got a real vibe to it. This is one of the more structured cards that we've seen in the Cups. We have a very clear wall with water coming out of it, so that one feels pretty good to me. The 10, again, it's very structured down at the bottom, so we see definite space with this rock erupting out of it, although that rock has those weird eye pockets again, so it feels organic and alive in kind of an uncomfortable way. But then as we get to the top, we have these same little pockets, which makes me think this is again like a rock motif, but this is supposed to be the sky. So if we just looked at the top of this, I'd say, oh yeah, that's rock. If we just look at the bottom, I'd say, oh no, wait, that's sky. But then together, it's like, oh, your mind breaks a little bit and bends. It's so cool. Looking through our court cards again, we have portraits. Portraits superimposed over scenery. They're totally beautiful. Brigand of Ireland, Parzival. This one is a little bit weird just because we have these like odd melting hands almost clasped around this cup, and the look in his eyes, like this card actually creeps me out a little bit. It just looks like manic. And then that manic quality with these drippy odd hands and lack of a body, it's a very haunting image. I'm going to actually move on because it's haunting. Whereas she looks really peaceful and like, what a pair together. It's like, We're going to put him right over there so he can stare at us from the corner. Venus of Willendorf, just beautiful. And Odin. This is actually a bit of a standout for me just from these other cards because he seems kind of like he's in a space, but there are some like perspective oddities. Like this tree feels very flat against the ground, but this is clearly atmospheric perspective where we have the land behind getting a little bit lighter. It's interesting, kind of a weird little twist on things. We're moving along at a good clip. Like 15 minutes in and we're already to the swords. Loving it. The Ace of Swords, oh, I could gush about this card forever. It is so beautiful and it's ephemeral in kind of a whimsical way. It almost looks like storybook, the way that this giant sword is coming down, but I wouldn't necessarily call it optically challenging or different. It's just creative in its composition. So beautiful, but not really what we're looking for here. Two of Swords, I did talk about this one a bit. We have these structures on top with space that feels like it's going back, but this rock in particular, especially towards the top, starts to have some of the same motifs as, say, like these trees. I think this one is definitely more of a refined space, but still gives me like odd vibes. The Three of Swords is probably the flattest card in the whole deck. It's different just in that it's just a wall, basically, that we're seeing like this beautiful drip. Stunning for the Three of Swords, and I love that it's not stabbing into anything. We just have that little hint to it, but not particularly optical illusion-y, just very different, very unexpected. Four of Swords here, we have that leaf motif kind of being repeated, which is beautiful, and a very realistic space. Beautiful tree, kind of going back into this strange forest, but like you can tell where things are supposed to be placed in space. I just love it. This one gives me Four of Cups vibes with, again, like you think this is maybe water or maybe looking up for a tree, but then it's like, oh, that's like a horse or something. And you see the eye and you see these really odd teeth and this matted fur. And then it's like, okay, that's an upsetting image on the bottom. Really cool for the 5 that you have this pained, almost like intensely, just like it's such an intense emotional quality to this animal. It looks like it's in pain or screaming or crying or, reaching for something or being pulled down. You can just read so much into that. And the first time I realized that wasn't actually an animal, I was very upset. I'm always, sad to see animals or humans being like hurt and depicted in art, but I think it's powerful and can be used great. And I would much rather this be there than not, because I think that's a really stunning portion to this deck. We also see a bubble here on the 5. So every suit so far has had a bubble in a different card, which is just really cool. Totally wild. We're going to put this opposite of Percival over here so we can just have all the wildness of this deck kind of front and center. Oh, my leg just fell asleep. Okay. Legs have been healed. Blood flow has returned. I'm looking at the Science card here. We again have a very tree-like motif, but this has to be a face. Like, matrixing is a thing. Human beings want to create faces out of stuff, but like, look at that. That is eyes, nose, and a mouth if I've ever seen one. This like haunting face emerging from this, I think, rock face in the back. But then we also, like, it's so odd that it moves with this tree. Like, compositionally, it's beautiful, but like, what are the chances that rock and that tree would actually go? But then we have this maybe river going into the background here, which completely goes against this, the idea of this being like a rock face. And then what the heck are these patches of bright on top? This image is downright spooky in kind of a cool way as well. I think it's mostly because of that face to me. But this just breaks my brain a little bit. Like, what's happening down there? Or maybe this is like skin or something, or like flakes of bark coming over some dark areas. I'm not 100% sure. I think it's really neat though. We're gonna cover up this dude in a second because he's creeping me out over there. Yeah, I don't feel like I need to sort of explain why this is illusory. We have a face that's melting into several other faces, and it's beautiful, and it's also kind of emerging from rocks. But yeah, I think that one's fairly straightforward. We're really upgrading here from that guy to that guy. Sort of loving it. And I hope my tone is clear with this. I freaking love this deck. It's beautiful. The oddness of it is what I like so much about it. Any old deck could be straightforward with its imagery. This one I feel is very bold in taking it in this ultra surrealist direction. So I hope you don't take any of my, I was going to say critiquing, but it's not even critiquing, my commentary as negative, because boy, it's just really not. Here we have one very strong tree and one that's much more ephemeral and kind of fades into the distance. And the only thing that seems illusory to me is like, this is the tree that really draws your eye compositionally speaking. It bisects the image, it's strong, it's powerful, it's easily identifiable. This one is much harder to identify because it's faded at the edge. It just doesn't quite catch your eye the same because it's almost the same colors as the background, but it does cover up swords, so we can see that it has volume and opacity to it, which is cool. So a little bit of illusory stuff happening, but mostly kind of fairly straightforward. I do love the little triangle on top there too. This one, we're back to like one of these odd skulls almost. Just these strange shapes kind of emerging. It looks like maybe a bird with a fin on the top. There's a beak in there. It's like flaking, but also maybe bone. Is this like skin coming down from the top? And there's also like, it seems like it's spraying back, maybe skin or something. It's really wild. And then on top of all that, what the heck is this thing down here? The whole thing is just really, really strange. But like, this is not my favorite part of the composition, to be honest. Like, it almost seems a little tacked in just because there's not a lot of space in this card. But this bit of the image, especially that eye, is so absorbing that you barely even notice it, or at least I don't. All in all, very nice. So cool. This is like a real throwback here. I'm a big video game fan, and this reminds me of the track Yoshi's Valley from Mario Kart. That's a weird pull in a tarot video, but like all the different paths that you could take. If you are not up on my random Mario Kart reference though, here we have what looks like, crisp space. It's a wild space because it's so different with all these little pockets to kind of explore. Like if I could live in any Haindl Tarot card, I think it'd be this one. But the space actually makes sense, not super illusory. Oh, these are my favorite court cards because I'm like low-key obsessed with Egypt. We have Isis here. I love that little figure peeking out on the bottom. We have Osiris. This is an odd court card just because of how flat it is, but it makes sense given Egyptian imagery. We have Nut or Nut. I think I said it the same both times, but insert correct pronunciation here. And Ra with these amazing sun discs. So cool. And under the stones. Here for the stones, this ace feels the most like its suit. It is interesting though that there is just a plain old bird on this one though. That actually feels odd in some ways in this deck because the animals that we've seen so far are like bird melting into the sky, horse that looks like it's being, torn apart by the emotions, Cthulhu-like beast melting into the water, like normal Midwest animals. But no, here we just have like a bird, and I kind of appreciate that. I think this does fit in with the kind of oddity of all the aces, though. It's really nice. Oh, I just got to take a second. This too, It's beautiful. The oddity here is with these lines, like what the heck? If the lines weren't there, this space would make perfect sense. We're looking at like the mouth of a cave. But no, he's like superimposed this beautiful duality, this ebbing and flowing, this almost like rhythm. It feels like the rock is like full of audio and it's vibrating and we get to see the waveform. It's so cool. This is not spaciously very strange, but it is visually just so different from anything else in the deck, and I love it. This down here, I don't really know what that is, but I don't pay attention to that too much because look at those lines. Oh, so good. The 3, this one is like, now we're getting back to weird peak Haindl odd space. So we have maybe a tree in the background here, covered up by moss, question mark. But then we have this object that kind of seems to be sitting in front of everything, maybe behind this moss, but also like melting into the background somehow. And then are we looking at the edge of the tree or more kind of that moss back there? I have some questions about sort of the structure of how this card is built, but it's very cool. And then on top of all that, you know, a tree you imagine would either hit hard ground or continue down, but past the moss, it almost looks like we get to peek under something at stones now. This is like top tier, like what the heck are you thinking, Haindl? I love you. Trying to find interesting places to put these cards now. Another kind of weird one. From here down, roots and branches. So cool, like spidery almost and just full of space. Here up, it looks like maybe flat stucco wall or something. Like there's not a ton of space to it, or maybe like branches reaching over, but together, what the hell is happening? I just love it. It's odd, it's strange. And on top of that, I just love the primary colors on the stones, but definitely some weirdness happening in this guy. This one, oh, this from here to here feels like a really big jump. I would guess that he painted this one early and this one late because this has so much more space and light into it, where this feels very flat. It's still beautiful, but it's very flat. This feels incredible. We have a precipice of stone that leads into these trees, but these trees are full of like veins or nerve endings. Then we have these like feathers or something reaching down from this brightness in the sky. This really feels like the 5 of Wands to me. And I wish I could like dig it out of my card pile here. But the 5 of Wands had a very strange structure, non-Euclidean geometry almost in the center with this bright space on top. And again, here we have this brightness like reaching down now into all this oddity. Oh, it's so cool. This deck is so cool. Pass that over to the side here. Here, all of a sudden we're back to like a normal space. A really cool winding like cave that goes back. Beautiful, full of depth, love it. This one almost feels cosmic to me. And part of that is the rock pattern that appears here. So it looks like maybe space rocks or something. But just like the way this is structured, it feels like gravity isn't working or something. We have like these huge rocky overhangs maybe that are supported by these tiny little stone columns. All of this rock with a crack through it that feels like it should collapse and then peeking back into space. So all of a sudden, all of this weight that's happening over here should probably be collapsing down. Just so interesting. A wonderful little thing happening here where the stone looks structural, but the space feels like it's beyond gravity. This is another one where like, is anybody else seeing faces there? Like maybe an eye and almost like an elongated beak or something. And it's got like a weird mustache maybe. And just like strange, maybe elongated skulls with an eye right there and a mouth down here. Very like reptilian almost. Very strange. And then we have this column coming up through the center, but this also feels like a rock, but there's definite foreground background separation. Just hard to sort of pin it down. And here we have our bubble on again, a different card from the other suits. So it seems like every suit gets its own bubble. I'll have to mill on that. I wonder why each of those get them. Kind of neat. This one, again, feels kind of flat to me. It actually really sort of echoes the 4, I want to say, of stones. Oh, yes, it's right here. The 4 of stones, yes. with these, you know, horizontal things kind of reaching across the surface and then something cool happening at the bottom. This one definitely has a more rising feel to it. So these could be branches coming off the tree. I feel like this one feels flat, but it makes sense. That light though, the darkness around, it feels like space. It feels like a snowy crevice that we're looking through the sun. It's just gorgeous. I want to keep talking about it. It's so pretty. Here we have our court cards. Again, I'm just going to kind of roll through these because not a lot of strangeness that isn't kind of inherent. White Buffalo Woman, Chief Seattle, Spider Woman, and Old Man. I will just call out in this card, we do have a little more strangeness than usual. One, because it's our only non-portrait court card. And two, because we have like footprints here that are like baked into earth, but also hands reaching up over some sort of invisible space. And these odd, like almost human footprints on the bottom. Super weird and creepy, and I love it. Okay, we have arrived at the major arcana. We'll take a look through here. And these ones, it almost feels like cheating to talk about the oddities because these feel like collage to me, like painted collage. All of these different elements being poked in. So what I think I'm going to do is just shift slightly and point out my one favorite thing about each court card. I'm going to be honest, I'm probably going to forget that by card number 2, that it's only one favorite thing. So we'll see how this goes. Favorite thing about the Fool is how often it breaks the border. This bird is breaking the border. The Fool itself is breaking the border. And it's not always even. We have this like little pop of white all the way around the edge. Really pretty. Favorite thing about the Magician here is this extra set of eyes. I mean, there's lots of eyes here, but like this whole almost structure growing out of the Magician's head, looking that way, it's just pulling your eye in two very different directions. One towards like where this wand is going, one towards kind of this starry night moon. And oh, I actually hadn't noticed this before, but it almost looks like the 2 of coins down there. Kind of a little nod back to that awesome striation. Oh, right there. Beautiful. The High Priestess. I really gushed about the High Priestess during my, I think that was the top 5 faves video. The story of this camel. It's beautiful. My favorite thing about the High Priestess gotta be that camel. Just there's so much baked into the narrative of that. It's awesome. The Empress. Favorite thing about the Empress is the wateriness of it. Almost like standing on a moon, maybe on water. It looks like she's floating almost. The Empress is so often earthy and crunchy, for lack of a better term, and just like full of vitality and all this greenery that the idea of water feels very cool to me. The Emperor. Favorite part of the Emperor is this diamond above his head. It's a little maybe tough to see here, but it's got all the primary colors in it in black. And I just love the idea of that solidity being made up of colors. Like colors are the basis of the universe. Haindl, you and me, bro. We got this. It's beautiful. The Hermit. I'm sorry, the Hierophant. I got so excited. The Hierophant. My favorite thing is this old, cool skeleton key, kind of like emerging from a fold of fabric or something. Half shout out, though, to the night sky back here because it's just gorgeous. It does look a little hermity as well. The Lovers. My favorite thing about the Lovers is this super weird goat head. And I think it just is like a unicorn goat with one horn on top. It just looks like a little dopey, and I kind of love it. And again, just like it's really odd that there's a head emerging out of there. Like many things in this deck, it's a little odd. The Haindl Tarot. It's a little odd. I'm going to be their new marketer. The Chariot. Not my favorite card in the deck. I'm going to be real with you. Favorite thing about the Chariot is, I was going to say it doesn't come up all the time. That feels really harsh, though. I love the glitter on the gold in the Chariot. Little flecks of light. Boy, I'm sorry, Chariot. You're in there. Strength. My favorite thing about the Strength card is this moon really popping out of that dark night sky. It's a really cool little point of highlight in this card that is largely monotone. Like obviously there's variation, but that moon really grabs you when you're not kind of expecting it. Really lovely. I had not considered getting to these cards as I stack up all this crap around. So we'll see how it goes. The Hermit, finally. My favorite thing about the Hermit is the super bold choice to completely white out the top of the card. In no other card have we seen this lack of space or lack of detail, and it makes it really powerful here. This feels like unbelievably bright light in this world, because like even here in the Hierophant, that has a little pocket of white light, or even in the Empress, but it's like in context, it's emerging from something. This is just like unbelievably blow the lens out of the camera bright. So cool. Oh, the Wheel of Fortune. The thing I like about the Wheel of Fortune is just the quality of the rendering of this. Things fold in and out of each other. It just looks smooth and buttery and beautiful. And also blue's my favorite color, so there's a lot of blue in there. Justice. My favorite thing about Justice is the fact that the scales aren't even. This is a little bit more shallow. This is a little bit more bowed out. Really neat. When you think Justice, you think of this like perfectly balanced, symmetrical thing. And he's like, no, you know, we're just going to go kind of our own way. Really, really lovely. We'll go up top there. The Hanged Man. My favorite thing about the Hanged Man, and I feel like a broken record, but are these little moons, like in a largely gray image with this like beautiful rainbow behind it. We have this little teeny tiny pop of white that just pulls your eye in. Like you can unfocus your eye and you just kind of keep coming back up there. It's so cool. And also his foot is pointing right to it. Like this compositionally is like an arrow pointing to the moon, and it's very cool. Whoops. Death is trying to escape here. There's no escape, Death. Favorite thing about Death is this bird. I love birds, and this one is rendered really beautifully, and it's purple, which is a totally underrated color. And I love a good like dead Death card, but like there's a skeleton on here, but like that bird is very alive, and I kind of like that. Oh, alchemy. Favorite thing about alchemy, I'm gonna say these two faces in the center. Kind of a cool little, like these are the things grabbing your attention, but a cool little like Easter egg down there. Part of me almost wishes they were flipped, like you could see the red skull on the left and the blue face on the right, but that's all cool. I also love that mouth is like bleeding or something, and we have a skull down there, just, you know, very alive, vibrant figures up here, and very like not looking great figures down there. A lot of cool rotational things happening. Very neat card that I want to talk about more on a future date. My favorite thing about the Devil are the spiraled horns. A lot of how I read the Devil card, it has to do with the idea of a spiral and constantly kind of getting better, and how challenge factors into that. It's a very Thothi interpretation of the Devil, but I think it's lovely how it's done here. Oh boy, here we go, down to the bottom of the stack. The Tower. My favorite thing about the Tower is like, I just want to comment on this. I think it's really interesting how modern this looks. Like it looks like a skyscraper, which is obviously a fairly powerful image for hopefully obvious reasons, but it does feel a little bit out of place here. I'm going to say my favorite thing though is the color down here. It looks like a sunset maybe, and just not what you'd expect from this Tower card, which is full of chaos and disruption. We have just this very peaceful sunset happening. It's beautiful. All right. We're almost there. We're all going to make it. The star. Oh, my favorite thing about the star is how hidden this figure is. Normally this is a naked figure in many decks, just like bold and out there. And this star is as covered almost as she possibly could be. There is almost no skin showing. It's this really cool subversion of what a star typically is. I think it's lovely how it's done. Oh, the moon. My favorite thing about the moon, okay, I'm going to cheat and say two things about this one, because this wild crab down here is like way too cool. But check out this unicorn whose like whole face is the horn. It's badass is what it is. And it like, the horn is like folding over itself and its eyes peeking out. It's like, yeah, what? I got a super awesome unicorn horn. What are you going to do about it? Bring it on. Apparently the Haindl Tarot brings out like the aggressive bro in me, which is just crazy. My favorite thing about the sun, bringing it on back, is that it has a giant sun in it. Sun cards like don't have huge suns, and it blows my mind. It's a beautiful yellow sun. Beautiful, Haindl. Nice job. Come back to me, my sweet cards. My card nest is going. That's okay. I'm just going to pick up these last two here. And we're going to... There we go. Favorite thing about the Aeon? I'm going to say this eye up top here. Beautifully rendered, almost like peeking into this image. Also kind of this red down here. They have like these two rivers going, but very neat little points of interest pulling your eye away from the obvious focal point. Very neat, but this is just like, it looks crafty, almost like, oh, what's going on in there? I'm just going to take a little peek. And then last but not least, we have the Universe. And again, not one of my favorite cards in the whole deck, but I do enjoy how this fire is rendered. It feels like it's full of movement, like fire should be. Well, thank you so much to the viewer who suggested that I do a quick flip through here. And I think this is shorter than my typical ones. By my standards, this is fairly quick. Hopefully this is what you were expecting. If not, my apologies. I like to talk a lot, so flip through, accomplished. Haindl Tarot, sweet. Parzival, still creepy. There he is. Oh, hello. And I think we're going to leave it there. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.